find in tribal societies. And so therefore the current discourse, the 1 hour is a very short time, but I will try to do justice to the very understanding of this concept. Then of course the concept like tribes. I will go through the slides, but before that I just want to give a perspective to what I am trying to do, a preliminary sort of introductory sort of today's discourse. Again, when I look at tribals, there is of course no confusion. Though we use word tribe in India, some people use international indigenous people. Therefore, if you look at the even document, you find they declared 1993 as a international year of indigenous people. And some people in like Sri Lanka, other they call in Australia they call it autochthonous, and some people call it ethnic categories. So, or there are different denominations we call, and even in India we call some people call it Banavasi, some people call them Adivasi. These are different terminologies people use to uh, explain what is called tribe. And anthropological discourse, if you look at in the beginning from Durkheim, talk about primitive concepts. So there are, of course, that is why if you look at Durkheim's analysis, called the primitive societies. So many anthropological leaders also use that a primitive society, primitive society, traditional societies. Some of the terms they have used to explain them. And though in Indian context, we look at tribes primarily, and then scheduled tribes, because we look at a legal point of view, which is constitutional. See, there are tribes on the fifth and sixth schedule, and define them as schedule, and therefore we call them as tribes. And then there are the different nomenclatures of tribe. People tend to define tribal very ethnic category in terms of. And then many years ago, the people used to define tribes in terms of the racial stock as categories. So earlier writings on tribes, because they distinguish themselves from the skin pigmentation, from the hair, from the height, from the color. So they distinguish themselves, tribes differently. Some tribals are settled, some are nomadic, and different regions. And then we look at tribes in northeast India, tribes in central provinces, and like Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Bihar, Odisha, which is called Chotanagpur Plateau, Jharkhand. And then we have tribes in southern India, in Andhra Pradesh, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, to these Andaman Nicobar Islands. So you look central India, the Himalayan tribes, again, you find different categories of tribes. But they also provide a diverse picture to us. And look what the latest data, almost 8.3% of India's population constitute tribes, and tribes constitute that much population. It's significant, and therefore, if you look at our reservation pattern, we also provide them 8% reservations in terms of the population. So therefore, these are certain things we look at as concept of tribe. But of course, there are many policy papers published, including Planning Commission and Government of India's Department of Tribal Affairs. They keep on publishing documents. We talk about the policy planning on tribals, defining tribals. Many years ago, we used to define tribals as primitive tribes. Now we call it not primitive tribes. We define them as PBTGs, are particularly vulnerable tribal groups. So there are PBTG tribes. For example, in Madhya Pradesh, we have some tribe called Saurias. In Odisha, you find Khons, Dongria Khons. There are different type of categories which are called particularly vulnerable tribes, not because they're primitive, because the threat they are facing, and the verge of extinction they are because of the different type of changes taking place across the world, and more so in India. So therefore, their very identity is under threat. So they call about their vulnerability in terms of disease also. So we will look into all the perspectives and then say how law plays a role in transforming this positive or negative dimensions we'll see. And that is why the current session is on these issues. Now, let me go to the slides and then try to explain you from my sense. Of course, it's a picture which says what tribes. Now, there are different tribes, and they are looking at the clothes. Their jewelry, their ornament are different. Their dance posture, their work is different. So when you look at a tribal, and they distinguish themselves from one to any others. For example, if you go to Chhattisgarh, you find there as Muria and Madia tribes. Then they find a Bison horn tribe, which their dance program, they always use the Bison horn, distinguish themselves by different pattern. So there are, in the contrast, you find there as Rajguns, who are much more assimilated with Hindu society and call themselves part of that. So as you look at different type of tribal and peasant and then Indian normal interaction with them, you will find they are vastly different from each other and from other communities as well. So these are certain times when you look things at tribals, we think, look at the type, the beads they use, the dresses using, and many other terms, and the instruments they're using. So the many years ago, I was in a conference where one of our former chief minister, and then it was 7, 8 times MP from Risha. He used to say that, look, there are 50 tribal instruments, musical instruments you got about with different sound coming. So if you look at tribals, in terms of that race, in terms of design, in terms of their livelihood pattern, in terms of the music, in terms of culture, so there are also vast differences in that, and it gives a what is called tapestry to India, in terms of the cultural heritage they have and produce. So this is what we normally find in terms of when you think of tribes, it just certainly comes to us that they're a very happy-go-lucky type of people. They're enjoying their life. If you look at the dance program, for example, in many part of in Odisha, there is a book called the tribal called Parja. So that their answers are different patterns. And they used to enjoy everything, merrymaking, happiness is there in them. So different tribal groups, despite the conditions, difficulties, economic conditions, they always enjoy their lifestyle, and therefore their inherent part of them is, of course, their dance and the music. So that is why often we look at tribals either two categories: either you find them in extreme economic poverty, that you find many tribals across India, and which is also suggested by data. If you look at their child nutrition pattern, you will find a large number of tribal groups in India suffer from acute malnutrition because of the conditions they're living in economic. But then also you find this type of happiness they're enjoying. And then there's a great divide in terms of different tribal groups as far as their access to the resources is concerned. For example, I don't mind naming, for example, if you look at the Government of India's portal and you find out number of bureaucrats in India, a large number of them will be from Mera categories, from in Rajasthan, which is in, and if you look at that and contrast that with the Ho or Biro or Madia, Abuz Madia, or other tribal group, or Chenchus, you will find their presence is negligible. So there, of course, you find the distinctive patterns in different tribal groups who are highly developed and literate, and other tribal groups who are still at the bottom of what is called development pyramid, if I want to say so. This is what is the general introduction to this idea. Now let's look at other pictures of that. Second slide, I will see. Again, you look at this picture in contrasting. It's look at the travel, the conditions while travel is put economically. And this one you find is they're engaged in agricultural activities. And here you find they are going to sell things in the market and telling with the children, which talks about the barefooted and then the path they are traveling through. So it actually talks about where they are also residing and also their economic conditions. And then if you look at their dresses and otherwise, you'll find their attempt to modernize themselves, or they are the changing lifestyle that is taking place. So these are the pictures I talk about. When I look at this, the tribal woman who's harvesting, I am very happy to suggest that recently Government of India has talked about this across the world. They mention millet, and we're increasingly using some millet in certain things. I remember it during my childhood days when we used to come from tribal areas. Anybody who was eating millet is considered to be poor, inferior, like this. And today it has become, it has come to the place of the five-star hotels and the dining room of the richest people in India. Now, interestingly, and why I said this, one tribal woman who has come, she is known as the queen of millets in Odisha. I think she had 40 odd types of millets produces. So there are certain things also you find exception to that. So this is actually talks about the contrasting pictures of tribals vis-a-vis India, both within the tribal groups and outside the tribal groups, what type of picture emerges. And that is the staple diet for a sociologist. Because the sociologist will look into the custom, traditions, the patterns of relationship, and then the interaction and the interrelationship. So that is what is the bottom line of sociology. And that is why this gives us a way to look into these tribal groups. Next slide, please. So this again, what is the traditional activities? Now, many of you, I don't know how many of you actually know this type of patterns husking, we talk about it, but these are different approaches. And look as a hand was used to it. And if you look at these pictures, they see they're harvesting patterns. Oh, look what she's holding in her hand. Many of you may not have seen those things. And if you're a rural connection, probably you might have seen how rural people use that. So for modern generation, it's also important to know that the types of tools and the people used in the day-to-day life and the struggles they are going through. And if you look at her hand,